face of the chicken is adorned with several modifications of the skin that are thought to be in part a function of sexual display. As seen here, this includes the comb, wattle, ear, and earlobe. The comb is located on the dorsal midline. It can vary greatly between breeds and can be used to distinguish between them. On the ventral side of the face hang wattles, and on either side of the face are ornate earlobes adjacent to the external ear.
The digestive tract of the chicken begins in the mouth, which has no lips or teeth, so to answer the question, no, chickens do not have lips. The mouth empties into the esophagus, which is also sometimes referred to as the gullet. You can also see the trachea, which is part of the respiratory system. The trachea runs along the esophagus and is the structure through which air enters the bird. The trachea funnels inspirated air into the lungs. The function of the lungs basically is to facilitate gas exchange. However, because avians have air sacs, which look like tiny balloons at the distal end of the trachea, air flows through the lungs on both inspiration and expiration. Along with functioning in respiration, air sacs also regulate intra-body pressure and body temperature. There are cartilaginous rings along the trachea, as you can see clearly in the picture. The syrinx is in there too. It's located where the trachea bifurcates or splits into two separate branches. It has a similar function as the larynx in mammals. The distal end of the esophagus has a specialized area for the storage of feed called the crop. The crop aids in the digestion of food before it enters the proventriculus. The crop is located at the base of the neck as it is viewed externally. In birds, the stomach consists of two parts. The first part, being the proventriculus, is also called the glandular stomach or true stomach. It's caudal to the crop, and it secretes hydrochloric acid and pepsin, which are useful in protein digestion. The ventriculus, also called the gizzard or the muscular stomach, is caudal to and is much larger than the proventriculus. The proventriculus basically grinds the food to prepare it for digestion, which makes it easier for the chicken to absorb the nutrients later on. The ventriculus empties into the small intestine, which consists of three portions or sections. These three portions are the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenal portion is the most cranial and is significant because the pancreas is located in the duodenal loop. The pancreas secretes enzymes which enter the duodenum via the pancreatic ducts. The large intestine consists of a pair of ceca and a short, straight intestine called the colon or rectum. This is pretty similar to the rectum of mammals. The cloaca is the very end of the digestive system. This portion of the digestive system represents a common passage for digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems. The cloaca opens externally in what is called the vent, and that's where it all ends.
The chicken reproductive system is heterosexual and requires both a male and a female. The male reproductive system consists of two testes, each with a different duct that lead from the testes to the cloaca. It is important to note that the male chicken does not have a penis. The testes are bean-shaped and located against a backbone at the front of the kidney. In the testes, twisted tubes called seminiferous tubules are found. This is where sperm is produced. It is also important to note that the left testes is usually bigger than the right. The deferent duct transports the sperm from the testes to the cloaca, from which they enter the oviduct of the female when mating. 1 cubic millimeter of semen produced by the male contains about 3 to 5 million sperm. The female reproductive system consists of the ovary and the accompanying oviduct. Only the left reproductive organ survives and reaches maturity to produce eggs. This ovary is located just in front of the kidneys in the abdominal cavity and is firmly attached to the wall of the cavity. The ovary consists of follicles which contain an ovum, also known as a yolk. These follicles can be in any of the 5 stages of development, which are primary, growing, mature, discharged, and arthritic follicles. The oviduct consists of 5 distinct parts known as the infundibulum, magnum, isthmus, uterus, and vagina. The infundibulum, which can be up to 9 cm long, lies adjacent to the ovary. It engulfs the yolk that has just been released from the follicle into the adjacent ovarian pocket. This is the site of fertilization of the ovum by the male sperm. The magnum is the longest segment at up to 40 cm long. Its function is to add approximately 40% of the albumin to the developing egg. The isthmus is approximately 12 cm long. It adds approximately 20% of the albumin and the shell membranes to the egg. The uterus is relatively short, measuring up to 12 cm in length. It adds approximately 40% of the albumin and all of the shell. This is the reason why it is often called the shell gland. The vagina is about 12 cm long. Its function is to add pigment to the outer shell. Finally, the cloaca is where the egg is held prior to being laid. It is important to note that molting in chicken can reinvigorate egg production. Molting is the orderly replacement of feathers by shedding old feathers while producing new ones. In the case of Chiquita, we can infer that she was molting because all of her follicles are in the primary follicle stage.
The heart of the chicken is encased in a thin membrane called the pericardial sac. The tip of the heart, or apex, has a small fatty deposit, as well as around the coronary band at the top of it. Changes in the fat deposit of the coronary band can be an indication of systemic disease. The heart pumps blood throughout the body at a rate of 200 to 350 beats per minute. The heart consists of 4 chambers, a left and right atrium, and a left and right ventricle. Oxygenated blood flows from the lungs through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. It then travels into the left ventricle, where it is pumped to the rest of the body through the aorta. Deoxygenated blood returns to the heart through the caudal vena cava and a pair of cranial vena cava into the right atrium. It flows into the right ventricle, which pumps the blood through the pulmonary artery to the lungs to be oxygenated again. Avian blood, unlike mammalian blood, contains nucleated erythrocytes, or red blood cells.
Moving into the muscular system, we have the superficial pectoral. This muscle produces the downbeat of flight. The origin is the sternum and craniocostal cartilage. The insertion is the medial humerus and fascia of the arm and forearm. For marketing, this is the breast meat. Next is the supracoracoideus, which produces the upbeat of flight. Its origin is the coracoid, and its insertion is the dorsal aspect of the humerus. In terms of retail marketing cuts, this is the tenderloin. The biceps brachii originates from the supraglenoid tubercle and inserts into the cranial aspect of the proximal radius and ulna. In marketing, it is one of the main muscles of the drummet. The other main muscle of the drummet is the triceps brachii, which originates at the caudal border of the scapula and proximal humerus and inserts into the olecranon process. Here we see the biceps femoris, which originates at the sacrum, sacrosciatic ligament, and the ischial tuber, and inserts into the patellar ligament, the patella, tibia, and calcaneal tuber. Here we also see the semitendinosus, which originates from the sacrum and caudal vertebrae, the sacrosciatic ligament, and the ischial tuber, and also inserts into the cranial tibia, crural fascia, and calcaneal tuber. Both the biceps femoris and the semitendinosus form the retail marketed cut of the thigh. The gastrocnemius originates from the caudal aspect of the femoral condyles and inserts into the tuber calcanei. The tibialis anterior originates from the lateral aspect of the tibia and inserts into the first metatarsal or the hock joint. The tibia anterior, along with the gastrocnemius, form the drumstick. Finally, we have the adductor magnus, which originates from the ventral pelvis and inserts into the medial femur. We also have the semimembranosus, which originates from the caudal vertebrae, the sacrosciatic ligament, and the ischial tuber, and inserts into the medial distal femur and the medial proximal tibia. Both of these also form the retail marketing cut of the thigh. Moving to the skeletal system, we'll start with the vertebral column. First, we have the cervical vertebrae, which are the neck bones. Then there are the thoracic vertebrae, which are found in the thorax or chest area. Then there are the lumbar vertebrae, which are found in the abdominal area, the sacral vertebrae, which are in the pelvic area, and the coccygeal vertebrae in the tail area. The pectoral girdle is composed of the clavicle, coracoid, and scapula. The clavicle, which is also called the wishbone, pulley bone, or fulcrum, lies at the base of the neck and is a fused bone. There are air sacs located between the two branches of the clavicle. Lying on either side of the rib cage and attaching the shoulders to the breastbone, we find the coracoid. They lie just caudal to the clavicle and are thick bones when compared to the clavicle. Finally, the scapula, or shoulder blade, is a long, thin bone which runs along the top of each side of the rib cage. When looking at the wing of a chicken, we find that the bones composing this structure are the humerus, radius, ulna, and wingtip. The humerus is the upper wing bone. Following the humerus, we find the radius, which is the small, straight, lower wing bone. Finally, we have the wingtip, which is the bone at the very end of the wing. It is commonly fractured during the slaughter process. The pelvic girdle is comprised of the synsacrium, the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. Notice that there is not a pubic symphysis in the chicken skeleton, which is probably an adaptation for egg laying. The lumbar, sacral, and the first 6 caudal vertebrae are fused into an immobile dorsal bony structure, which we know as the synsacrum. The ilium is also part of the pelvic girdle, which is a flat bone on either side of the anterior half of the synsacrum. Next, we have the ischium, which is a flat bone on each side of the posterior half of the synsacrum. Finally, we have the pubis, which is also known as the pin bone, and is a long, thin bone that runs along the ventral side of the ischium. Moving down into the leg, we find the femur, tibia, fibula, and shank. The femur is the upper leg bone, commonly associated with the thigh retail cut of the chicken. The major lower leg bone is the tibia. There is also a very small bone in the lower leg called the fibula. Both the tibia and the fibula together form the drumstick retail cut of the chicken. Finally, we see the shank forming the lower portion of the leg, located below the hock joint. This section is normally removed during the slaughter process along with the paw. Moving to the abdominal portion of the chicken, we find the sternum and the ribs. The sternum is also called the keel or breastbone and is a single large bone on the ventral surface of the body. Here we also see 2 types of ribs, the vertebral ribs and the sternal ribs. The vertebral ribs originate from the vertebral column. The sternal ribs originate from the sternum.